Hello, welcome to the mental game. Have you ever wondered how you can become better at decision making and eliminate decision fatigue? Decision fatigue is where the volume and complexity of decisions overwhelm you. For example, should I leave my job? What should I eat today? Fries or a salad? Should I move to a new city? These are just examples. We make over 35,000 conscious decisions in a day. Introducing the finite state machine, a mathematical model used to illustrate logic and computation. A finite state machine consists of five core components, also known as the formal definition. The definition consists of Q, which contains the set of states, sigma, which contains the set of alphabets, Q0, which states the start state, F, which contains the set of final states, and the transition function. Do not worry, I'll be explaining these in more depth. This is an example of a finite state machine illustrating turning on and off a light bulb. I'm going to explain the core concepts of this finite state machine. The blue circles are called states, and the blue arrows pointing from one state to another is called a transition. An input is placed above the arrow, and this indicates if we can move to another state. The state with the additional arrow with no input is called the start state. And finally, the state with two circles is called the accept state, where essentially our goal is reached. The zero input illustrates switching off the light, and the one input illustrates turning on the light. So, at the start state, if we switch off the light, that being input 0, we will remain at the same state. However, if we switch on the light with input 1, we will move to the next state, which indicates the light bulb is on. You'll probably notice the loops on the states. This means that the state isn't changed if the specific input is put. For example, on the light on state, there's a loop indicating that if the input 1 is put, the state isn't changed and stays on the light on state. Let's now fill in the formal definition. There are two states, light off and light on. There are two inputs, 0 and 1. The initial start state is light off, and the final state is light on. And finally, the transition table that illustrates how the diagram moves between states based on the input. Now let's use this technique to ease our everyday decision making. Let's start off with an example. So, the situation is that you're traveling and need to choose where to eat dinner. Note, you're staying at a hotel that has a kitchenette. Let's start off with the start state, where you have no food. You have two choices, to eat in a hotel or to eat in a restaurant. Let's start off by researching restaurants and identifying which ones we could go to. As you can see, this added a new state and a new transition. We can continue researching until we identify a good restaurant. This is indicated by the loop on the find restaurant state. Once we identify a good restaurant, we can go to that restaurant and eat food. This is represented by a new state and a new transition. As you can see, it's an accept state represented by the double circles. This indicates that we have reached our goal. But what happens if during research we find that all restaurants are closed, or we don't find any good restaurants, or we decided to eat in the hotel? Then we accordingly add a new state and 3 new transitions. As you'd notice, this is an accept state as we have reached our goal, that is to eat food. But what happens if we don't have any groceries to make our dinner with? Well, we will have to go to the supermarket to buy groceries, return, and make dinner. But if the supermarket is closed, unfortunately, there's no food to eat. And this creates a transition to the start state, where we need to start the process again. Additionally, I'm going to add a transition from the start state to eat in hotel state, as we may initially decide not to eat in a restaurant. And you're probably thinking right now that you can add more transitions and states, and that's the beauty of it. You can deal with a multitude of scenarios and logically make decisions. Showcased is a formal definition. However, you may realize that there are quite a bit of states and inputs, hence why I left out the transition table. Although this is fine as we're using this for personal reasons, but in the computer science realm, this is frowned upon. This is another example of a finite state machine I'm using to plan my job situation after university. I'm going to perform a walkthrough. So prior and during graduation, we will apply to jobs, and this is a continuous process. As I apply to jobs, I may receive interviews. And if the interview goes well, I may receive offers. I will evaluate my offers and accordingly make a decision where I will finally find a job. However, after the interviews, I may not receive any offers. Thus where I need to start applying for jobs again. Or I may not receive any interviews at all. Thus where I can go into building my resume by volunteering, skills building, and taking courses. This is just a brief example of how a finite state machine can ease your decision making and also create a structured path/plan. Showcased is a formal definition. Again, the transition table has been left out due to the size and number of inputs. And that's the end of today's video. Just to recap, everybody experiences decision fatigue and normally occurs when there are too many decisions or they're too complex. We can use a computer science mathematical model called a finite state machine to systematically illustrate decision making. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Please like and subscribe and also provide any feedback in the comment section. Have a great week and day. See you.